All right. So one thing that I neglected to cover last week, which was on the schedule, was about accessibility guidelines. So I'm going to go over it briefly today. And one of your assignments, I think the assignment due this week coming up, relates to accessibility as well as mobile development. So you are responsible for doing some of your own investigation and finding out information about accessibility. But I do want to point you, get you started in the right direction to make sure you understand what the issue is and to make sure you understand some of the strategies that are taken to help people access content on the web, and then talk about some specific cases. So accessibility relates to allowing people that have different disabilities access material on the web. All right. So be able to access content on the web regardless of their abilities or disabilities. Now, the most obvious example of a disability that affects someone accessing the web, what would you say the most obvious example is? Disability that keeps people, that may keep people from accessing information on the web. Blindness or vision. All right. And that's very true. And there's, first thing I want to cover is that there's sort of two parts to allowing people that are visually impaired accessing the web, as there are with any technology. And one of them is what's called assistive technology. Now, there's all kinds of assistive technologies. They can be simple or they can be complex. There can be, I've seen things where you have a pad that you connect to your computer and it displays the text in Braille, and you can use the Braille to read it if you were blind. Another thing that is built into operating systems is a screen reader. And let's see where it is. Of access. Okay. One of the things is that there's a narrator. There you go. And what this will do is this will read the screen to someone that is blind or visually impaired. All right, so I'm going to turn narrator on. Now, I'm not sure how it's set up, if you'll be able to hear it or not, but we'll try.
Narrator dialog, close, button, Alt+C. Narrator touch requires a touch screen that supports 4-finger input. Narrator touch is not available, but you can continue using narrator with a keyboard and mouse. Press the space bar to continue.
As you can see, what it did is it just read that box to me. So we'll press the space bar. Why didn't it tell you to click the close button, by the way? Why do you think it didn't tell you click the close button to continue? Any guesses? If you can't see, you can't use a mouse, right? So they give keyboard options.
Narrator dialog. Okay. Button. Alt+O. Heads up. Narrator heading level 1. Scan. Welcome to narrator.
I'm going to cheat.
This is narrator home, where you exiting narrator.
I don't want to cheat that much.
Narrator dialog. Okay.
Let's go to a web page.
Empty document. Scan. Empty document. Skip to content. Lorain County Community College logo. Image. Link. AZ index link. Faculty/staff link. Connect. Link. My campus link. Canvas search for. Edit. Search for. Button. Search link. Getting started link. Academics link.
Okay, as what you can tell is it's reading everything that it sees on the screen for you. Now, one thing that you can do is you can use the tab button
Link. How about
to
group?
move around the page.
Carousel buttons. Next. Link. 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 Pencil and paper. Link. 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 For our community. Link. More about the link. Fast track. 16 weeks or less to a new career. Start link. Get started today. Link. Fast track. Link. Girl holding box with geometric shapes. Campana Center. Link. Celebrating 60 years. Your community's college. Link. Link in the news. Link. Chips for America leaders visit Lorain County Community College. Link. Celebrating 60 years. Your community's college. Celebrating 60 years. Your community's college. Link. Learn more. Link. Link. Look link. The Aspen Institute and the Community College Research Center select LCCC for unlocking opportunity dialogue. Exiting narrator.
Okay, that's a little confusing for someone that is used to navigating the web through visual means, through seeing on the screen and using the mouse. However, if there was no other way for you to use the internet, you would learn how to use that and you would adapt to that. Now, the built-in narrator into Windows is just one kind of screen reader. They have more expensive that do a better job of reading the screen than that does. So let's think about that. That's an assistive technology, which means that it can be employed to help people access the screen. What's something that defeats the assistive technology? I'll show you one example here on Lorain Community College's webpage. The fact that we have a carousel notice it didn't narrate that because that's in an image, that isn't text on the web page. Some of the images, if you remember, it did say, like it said, a woman with a geometric shape or holding an object of geometric shape and so on. Now, that's where you come in as a developer. The assistive technology is there, but you have to code in a way that allows people to take advantage of the assistive technology. So let's think of an example of that. Well, we had an example already. We've seen an example of using the alt attribute. If you recall, when you make an image tag, you go something like this: image source equals whatever the name of the image is, and you specify alt equals alt, and you say women holding a cube. The other thing that we had, I think, is it said LCCC logo link to homepage. So by putting in these alt attributes is one way that you can do things as a developer to let the assistive technology do its thing. All right, so that's one thing we've all already learned. In the next couple of units that we cover, when we talk about forms and we talk about tables, we're going to talk about some other things that you can do to help people with different accessibility needs. Now, here's an interesting thing, and we can go down to virtually, all of the senses, I think, except smell, affect people's abilities to access the web. So first one we mentioned was vision. And one thing I want you to notice that when we talked about vision, the first thing that came to our mind was blindness. And that's obviously the most severe case of vision issues that someone can have. If they're totally blind and they can't see anything. But there's other visual impairments that are less severe than total blindness, but still impact the ability to access the web. Those include people that are colorblind. All right. Those involve people that have just poor vision. All right. And there's things we can do for them to help them access the web. What can we do for someone that's colorblind to help them access information on the web? Well, we can use combinations of colors that contrast. Don't put red text on an orange background, for example, because the contrast for that isn't going to be very good and the person is liable not to be able to see it. Now, you might say to yourself, well, that's just common sense, because even someone that can see colors is going to have trouble picking up red text on an orange background. And that's true. A lot of the things we do for accessibility reasons also benefit people that don't have those particular disabilities. So for color blindness, what you do is you have a good contrasting colors. All right. And that's going to help everyone, people that have color blindness, people that don't have color blindness. Poor vision, use big enough fonts. All right. Allow your page to be resized where it doesn't affect the content. For example, in this case, there's an option somewhere, zoom. And here's an interesting thing. Notice what's happening. And again, this is pointing out an accessibility issue. If I zoom to this page, some of the content gets bigger, some of it doesn't. Like this logo gets bigger, but this doesn't really get any bigger. If we had a wider screen, it would get bigger. Yeah, there we go. A wider screen would make it bigger. So I guess that doesn't have the problem, but making sure that you use good size font and that it works with the assistive technology of the browser that allows you to zoom. So the point I want to make about this is that assistive technology can help, and accessible web pages can help even people that don't necessarily have the full disability. Another one would be hearing. On one end of the scale, you have people that are deaf. On another end of the scale, you have people that are hard of hearing. They don't hear well. Another interesting case where your hearing is effective is if you're in a noisy place. All right. So I'm working on my laptop in a coffee shop, and there's the hustle and bustle going on in the coffee shop. And let's say, for the sake of argument today, that I didn't bring my headphones, because normally I could plug in my headphones and hear any audio. But in this case, I didn't bring it. I forgot to bring them, or I didn't think to bring them. Well, my hearing is affected. Even though I'm not hard of hearing and I'm not deaf, my hearing is affected. So in that case, again, you don't have to have the full blown disability for it to have an impact on you. So what can we do in the case of hearing? If we have an audio file, the one thing we can do is have a transcript of that audio file. So people can choose to either read it or listen to it. I notice there's news sites that have that. They'll have an article, I think NPR does it. Okay, here they just have. They don't have any audio for this one. But in some cases, they'll have an audio clip and then they'll have a text version of it. So supplying different ways of people to access the content is one thing you can do for accessibility. Having captions for your videos would help people that can't hear well or are in a busy place and didn't have their headphones and wanted to consume content that has audio with it. Another thing is people that have issues with movement. In other words, for some people, moving a mouse on the screen is a problem because they have neurological ailments or arthritis or other sorts of ailments that affect their movement of the mouse around the screen. One thing we can do for that is provide keyboard shortcuts. So that if you click something, if you click an alt and then a letter, you can use the link. An example of that is, we'll see that here. I don't want that, I want access key. So this is a button that you can click on, or you can go Alt S. I think it's Alt S. Let's see, on Google Chrome, it would be Alt key plus S. Notice it indicated that it was being clicked. This one doesn't do anything, so it's hard to demonstrate, but as you can tell, it got highlighted, which indicated that it was clicked. So you can add access keys to that. That will benefit people that can't use a mouse, and that will benefit people who are very quick with keys and love to use keyboard shortcuts. I know some people in Word use keyboard shortcuts for almost everything, or Excel or other Microsoft Office. You know, the real people that are very proficient in those oftentimes don't touch the mouse, all right? And therefore, they can accomplish things quickly rather than moving their mouse to a certain place on the screen. They can very easily type in an access key and get it to do what they wanted to do. Another thing you can do, the people that have issues with movement, is don't put things too close together. If you have a link, make sure the links are big enough that someone can easily move to them, and don't put two links really close together. If you can imagine, this is an extreme case, if I have link 1 and link 2, if I was moving a mouse, I might have trouble getting exactly on that thing to click on it, exactly on that thing to click on it. What if the links were bigger and there was sufficient space between them? Then even people that have problems moving can access them. Now, another condition that affects people, or other conditions that affect people, involve things like cognitive issues, issues with understanding, and that includes things like dyslexia, ADHD, and other issues. With dyslexia, one thing that you can do is use text and images together, right? If you have images that illustrate your news story, that might help someone with dyslexia be able to read and understand the news story because you've given them a context and you show that, and that might make some words that are hard to understand, make them easier for someone. ADHD, what you might want to do is keep your screens from being cluttered. Keep them from having too much going on. One of the great bad websites that usually everyone I think it's Lynn. Let's look up bad websites. Lynn's card, not Lynn. It was one letter off. We'll go to it, and this is really bad. Oh, why isn't there a link? They're just showing an image of it. We'll stick with the image. All that going on is going to distract someone with ADHD, but you know what? It's going to distract someone that doesn't have ADHD with all this stuff going on. There's nothing to focus on, all right? And if you actually go to this site, which we won't, there are things that blink on the screen, and things blinking on the screen, animation like that, can trigger people with seizures, all right? So therefore, all these issues come in, and all of these things, if I was going to summarize, I would say there's two things that deal with accessibility. One of them is to give multiple presentations. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean have a text story and have an audio of the story. All right. The text story is for people that can read, and the audio is for people that maybe have trouble reading but can listen. An audio version of something would be also very effective for someone that had ADHD or dyslexia, because it would narrate that for them. So one thing you could do is, if you had, again, a news story, present it as an audio file, also present it as text. All right. People that can't hear can read the text. People that are in a noisy place and can't listen to it at this point in time can read the text. Someone with dyslexia might prefer to listen to the text, or listen to the audio. A person that's blind might choose to listen to the audio. So by presenting the material two different ways, you give people the ability to choose the one that works for them. All right. Another example of that, giving keyboard shortcuts. That way you can click the link or you can press the keys to access it. All right. And as you read through this, as you do investigation, you'll find other examples of this kind of multiple presentation. All right. People that maybe are prone to seizures with animations. Maybe you have two ways of showing that animation. Maybe you show the animation if a person wants, or if they don't want, maybe they just see a series of images. series of still images that they could look through that illustrates the point. All right. So presenting things multiple different ways is one way to make your site accessible. The other thing is just good basic web design principles. Don't make your pages cluttered. Don't have too much on your page. Make sure there's adequate space between things on the page. Make sure you use a good color contrast, and so on. These are all things that are just plain old good web design. They benefit people with accessibility issues, but they also benefit everyone else as well. Now, there's some good resources online that can help you experience things to maybe give you some sensitivity to people with these different ailments. And let's go over some of them real quick. There are color blindness filters. So what this does is this allows you to upload an image and have you show what it would look like if you have different color blindness. Now they've already loaded an image for us, and this is if you have green weak color blindness. Notice how the green looks like more of an olive, and the colors are a little less vivid. This is if you have red weakness, blue weakness. That's if you have monochrome vision. If you have this particular kind of color blindness, that's how you would see that image, and so on. There's ones you could actually put in your URL and test it. This also shows you with images, and you can test red-green weakness, green weakness, blue weakness, same sort of things. There's actually one that allows you to put a URL in. Well, you could do a screen print of your website and put it through that way. But I would suggest that anyone developing a site would do that, would take screenshots of their website and run it through a colorblind simulator to see, can people with different color blindness see the text on the screen? Another thing that is really eye-opening is there are dyslexia simulators. All right, this is a reading simulation. Let's try to read this, given that this is maybe what a person with dyslexia would see. We begin our trip at a familiar place. Body, maybe, like yours and mine. It contains 100 billion cells that work. No idea what that means. Together, maybe? And within each one, of these many cells, each one I don't know what that means, has DNA. The DNA code is, point is that it's really hard to read, all right? And a lot of people think that dyslexia is simply like you read words backwards. It's not the case at all right? You can invert letters, you can flip letters, you can substitute letters. It's very difficult. And you can see that, number one, by having a good font, it can help people with dyslexia. And another thing, by having audio versions of your text, can help people as well. Let's look up a good font for dyslexia. They suggest use sans serif fonts such as Arial, Comic Sans. I wouldn't suggest that one, as letters can appear less crowded. The Comic Sans, from what I heard, is a good, so they're a good font for dyslexia. Alternates include Verdana, Tahoma, Century Goth, Trebuchet, Calibre, and Open Sans. Font should be 12 to 14. Putting more space between the letters helps. Putting more space between the words can help. Putting extra space between the lines. All of these things are CSS settings that you can do. Avoid underlining and italics. Avoid all capital letters. Lowercase letters are easier to read. So those are special things you can do for people with dyslexia. Again, that's my 2 points that I want you to get from this. Is number one, give alternatives that can really help make your page more accessible. All right. Images along with text, audio files along with text, and so on. The second is that that a lot of accessibility issues can be addressed simply by following the rules of good web design. All right. I guess the third point, I guess I do have 3 points, is that many of the things that you do for accessibility will also help people that don't have those particular disabilities. Okay, we'll go on to the next part that we're going to start this week and we're going to finish next week. And that is forms. One thing we haven't talked about is how to input data into a browser screen. For example, if we go to Google, we have a text box. And if we type something in, hit enter, it goes and it pulls up items that match what we search for. Give an overview of how that works. We have our client. That's us sitting at a browser connected through the internet to a web server. And we send data to the server and we get responses back. We make requests, we get responses. So if we just type in a URL, google.com, it's very simple. It brings up the Google homepage. If, however, there's a form on that page and we type that in, type something in that form and click submit, we send our request to the web server and include the stuff that we put into the form. All right. And then the server uses that to create the response for us. So we're going to write our own little form that's going to send information to the Google search engine and do a Google search. So I've just made a simple version of that page. And I type in HTML and I click submit. And that calls up the Google page. They allow you to do that. It's not like I'm sneaking into their web server or anything. They allow you to do that, and it pulls up information about the topic that I entered in. If I type in CSS, it goes and it searches for CSS. Now notice one thing. When I press something, the URL changes. And it has Q equals CSS on the URL. We go to the web page and we give it the thing that we're searching for right as part of the URL. We'll see how we do that in a second. So let's look at the HTML for my little search page. All right, it's pretty simple. First thing it has is it has a form tag. The form tag is like an envelope. It's going to contain a message of all the data that we're going to send to the server. Now, in our case, we're just sending one piece of information. We're just sending the word that we're looking for, the word that we want to search. But if we had more than one thing, for example, a login form would have a user ID and a password. Maybe a registration form for a website would have your first name, last name, city, state, zip, address, phone number, email address, and so on. So you could put a bunch of things in that form tag and they all sort of get wrapped together in a package to get sent to the server. In our case, we have a very simple thing. We just have the one thing that we're sending to the server. The action is the name of the server-side script that's going to process our request. So to do a Google search, this is the URL that you call. https://www.google.com/search. The method get relates to how we are sending the data across to the server. In this particular case, it sends the data as part of the URL. We're going to use get for all of our forms in this class. There is another one called post, and it sends the data to the server, but it doesn't show it on the URL. But for our cases, we're going to use get. Now, what is it going to send to the server? I have one item here that's a text box. Type equals text is a text box. And the name equals Q. Well, if you remember right, I said that the data on the query string was Q. So whatever we type in, that text box is going to get sent to the web server with the name of Q, which in our case is what Google needs to process this information. It needs the data to be called Q. I then have a submit button, which actually says, go ahead and send the data. So if I just type it in, just type it in. It's a text box. That's the thing. That's the thing in this tag here. Input allows you to type something in. Type equals text means it's a text box. We can type anything we want to in it. And it's going to be called Q. So I type something else in here. I've typed it in, but I need to press that button to actually send it to the server. That's what type of submit says. Notice I can't type anything in here. It's just a button that says submit. So I type that in, click submit, that sends it to the server. The server gets that data on the query string and uses it to do a query and pull up our results. So that is the simplest kind of form that you can have. Something with just a text box, sends it to the server processes it. In this example, this is a little more involved example, and I'll just introduce this to you. This is an example that has a couple of other things going. And take the time to review this, but we'll review this in class more detail next time. All right. Let's start looking at it though today. All right, first of all, here's my form tag. It's wrapped around everything that I'm going to send as part of this form. And we're sending a lot of stuff contained in this form. We have some text boxes, like a text box for name, text box for email. But then we have other form controls, and we're going to use the one that's appropriate for whatever we're trying to do. I have a few other things here too. Radio buttons, check boxes, and a text area where you can type a lot of stuff in. I then have a submit button which sends the data to this script. Now this script is just a test script. All it's going to do is it's going to display my data back to me. That way I can make sure I've sent the data correctly. So if I go and click it, it goes to this page and it shows the data that was sent. Now, I just wanted to introduce you to this. Take the time to review this form during the week coming up, and by next Monday, we'll go over it in more detail, and we'll start on tables. The one main point I want you to have is you have an assignment where you're creating a form for a pizza shop. All right. Do not use text boxes for everything. Because, for example, the size of a pizza that you're ordering can only be one of three things: small, medium, or large. So you're not going to use a text box in it because someone could type in anything in a text box. You'd want to use maybe a drop down or maybe radio buttons. Same thing with, I don't know, there's a type of crust, or I don't know, there's some other fields that only have a certain number of options. So, use the form control that makes sense. So review this over the next week or so, and we'll talk about it in class next Monday. Are there any questions? All right, if there are no questions, we will either see you next week or see you in lab.